This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. If you're going to bury the truth, make sure it stays buried. It's I Know What You Did Last Summer, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. It's a return to form. Wait, is this our first one since the summer series? We've recorded so many things in the last couple of weeks that I forgot with bonus episodes and stuff. Fantastic. It's a return to our normal format. We have all of our segments except for Lost in Adaptation. So let's get right into our first segment, which is always, let me sum up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
I Know What You Did Last Summer, the book. Julie James has just finished high school and been accepted to college when she receives an anonymous letter reading, I know what you did last summer. This sets off a chain of events that causes Julie to reunite with three former friends, Helen, Barry, and her ex-boyfriend, Ray. Over the course of the novel, it is revealed that the foursome were involved in a hit-and-run the previous summer, and the young boy that they struck died. All four are now being stalked by someone who knows what they did and is bent on making them suffer for it. The antagonist torments them with anonymous letters and images, and ultimately shoots Barry and tries to kill both Julie and Helen. Ray figures out that their stalker had a double identity and had been using both identities to get close to the girls. He arrives just in time to save Julie from being strangled. The attempted murderer is arrested, and the teenagers come clean to the police about what they did last summer.
All right, let's go ahead now, and I'm going to sum up the movie. Julie, Ray, Barry, and Helen are all archetypal high school seniors celebrating their final summer before college. On the 4th of July, while out joyriding, they accidentally hit a man walking across the road, and then, afraid to go to the police since there's alcohol in the car, they decide to dump the body and never talk about the event again. A year later, we rejoin our group, all dealing with the emotional trauma of keeping such a terrible secret, when Julie, the friend who was most adamant about going to the police and who has subsequently dealt with the guilt the worst, receives an anonymous letter declaring that someone still knows what they did last summer. As they try to figure out who the mysterious letter writer is, more and more people start to die at the hands of a hook-wielding phantom. Ultimately, Helen and Barry are murdered by the fishermen, and Julie discovers that they had actually hit, but not killed, the father of a girl who had died a year earlier in another accident with the person they thought they had hit and killed, and that it is that girl's father who is now seeking vengeance against them for hitting him and for hit-and-run victims everywhere, ostensibly. On a fishing boat, Julie and Ray are able to fend off the hook-wielding murderer, and he is swept out to sea, seemingly dead. The end. Roughly.
Yeah, roughly.
All right. We do have a Guess Who for the first time in a couple months, so let's go ahead and do that.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay.
All right. First up, her honey-colored hair was pulled back from her face and held in place with a ribbon, and the violet eyes were carefully shadowed and outlined to make them even lovelier. She was wearing a pale blue pantsuit with a scarf knotted at the throat. And just for fun, I have this description from the updated 2010 version.
Okay.
When the author updated it to be more current.
Right.
Her honey-colored hair was pulled back from her face and held in place with a gold band, and the violet eyes were carefully shadowed and outlined to make them even lovelier. She was wearing pale blue pants with a chunky crystal necklace at the throat.
Interesting. Well, the only one with blonde hair, we have 4 main characters in the film, and of the 2, one of them has blonde hair, the other one has dark hair. And so that would be Sarah Michelle Gellar's character, Helen.
That is Helen.
Crushed it. The pantsuit would be a look.
Yeah, it would, with the scarf at the throat.
Yeah.
Very 1973.
I was about to say, she actually probably wore something similar to that at some point in the Scooby-Doo movies.
Yeah,
she was
probably.
playing Daphne.
He was very tan. His light hair grew thick and long down over his ears, and his brows were bleached pale over his cat green eyes. He had grown a beard. It was short and stubby and looked as though it belonged on somebody else's face.
Nobody has long hair that goes down over their ears, really. Light hair. I mean, again, so of the 2 guys that are our leads, one of them has dark hair, one of them has light hair, and so assuming, and his hair is a little bit longer than Freddie Prinze Jr.'s, I guess, and maybe he could have grown it longer. I'm going to say that this is Barry.
This is actually Ray.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah.
Could have been either of them.
Her glance took in the brown eyes, brown hair, a strong, square-cut face, a medium sort of build. He was wearing conservative olive green swimming trunks, cut like shorts.
I guess I'll guess Barry again, because I don't know who else it would be.
This is actually my kind of red herring. This is the villain in the book.
Okay.
So he's not wearing a raincoat.
Oh, all right. Yeah. I mean, his jacket's green, kind of, I feel like, in the movie.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. It's always so dark. It's hard
Yeah,
to tell.
it's
But I
hard
think
to
it's kind
tell.
of green, like in the day when we see it, because he's wearing like a fisherman's coat. All right. I did terribly, but that's fine. I knew it was going to be tough. Let's go ahead and find out. Was that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
So when we open up in the film, we open up on a beauty contest that Sarah Michelle Gellar is taking part in, and it is called the Miss Croaker Queen contest. And I want to know if that's in the movie or in the book, because I want to know what that is. Because their town's called like Southport or something.
Yeah,
I don't know what
I don't
Croaker
know.
Queen is, and also it doesn't seem like anything related to fish or because it's a fishing village. So I thought it
Yeah.
would be something fish related or
Sure.
like oyster related or something. But I don't know what Croaker Queen
I
is.
have no idea either. This specific beauty contest is not in the book, but when we meet Helen in the book, she has recently won a beauty contest of sorts. She submitted her picture to a contest and won, and now she is the Channel 5 Golden Girl.
Oh, okay.
And her prize was basically a job at the TV station.
Interesting.
She like reads announcements and stuff on air.
Okay.
Hell of a way to get a job.
Yeah. But no Croaker Queen.
No,
whatever the heck
she doesn't
that
get
is.
a crown either.
Yeah, the crown is rather important
Yeah.
over the course of the film. So we're introduced to, obviously we already talked about our 4 main characters a little bit. We'll talk about them more later. But one of the other characters who's a minor character is a character named Max, who is played by Johnny Galecki, which most people would recognize from The Big Bang Theory. But he's been in plenty of other things. And he is Julie's friend who the other, Barry kind of picks on because Barry's like a jock and Max is like kind of a nerd. And he's trying to ask out Julie before she leaves for the summer, but she's like, "Oh, we're such great friends." He's the friend zoned nerd friend, and I want to know if his character is from the book.
It is not. I think this could potentially be a little bit of a nod to a character who pretends to be upset that Helen sort of strings him along, and he ends up being like the villain, so he wasn't actually upset about it, but maybe that's a nod to that in the book. I don't know.
Could
But
be.
that specific character is not from the book.
This movie is full of all of our characters, as I said in the intro, or not the intro, but the summary, are like the most stereotype versions of like teen movie leads, basically. Pretty much. I mean, we have a beauty queen.
We have
a
like beauty
jock,
queen, popular girl, douchey jock guy,
the bookish, like smart girl,
Yeah.
and then
like the sensitive guy.
yeah, the nice guy, but
Yeah.
who's like still very handsome.
Yes.
Like, yeah. And then we have the friend zoned nerd guy. So after the big the beauty contest and the party that they're at, they go and have like a little bonfire on the beach, and they sit around telling the world's oldest campfire story, literally the only campfire story I think I've ever heard ever. And that's the one about the guy with the hook hand and the couple in the car. And then they hear the sound and they look out, and finally, eventually at the end, they drive away, but then when they get home, they find the hook hanging on the door handle or whatever. And I want to know if that, I mean, obviously it makes sense for this movie because we end up with a character who uses an ice hook thing to kill people. And so I wanted to know if that, if they tell the world's oldest campfire story.
No, they don't, but I did enjoy that scene in the movie. I thought it was a fun way to remind the audience about that urban legend and like the different iterations
Yeah,
of it.
they're like arguing over the right way to tell it and stuff, which was kind of interesting.
Sort of like priming us for what's to come.
Yeah. So then they go after this. They're going home, and Barry's too drunk to drive, but it's his car. But Ray ends up driving, and while they're driving, Barry's like, "Woo!" and he gets out of the sunroof or moonroof or whatever, and he's like drinking and he ends up dropping his bottle, and that's what distracts Ray, and that is why they hit the guy on the road. And I want to know if it's Barry being a drunk asshole is the reason that they hit and kill a person or seemingly kill a person.
No, in the book they say that they've all had some beer and a little weed, but none of them are like causing a big drunk ruckus in the car. It's just like driving impaired in general.
Impaired driving. Interesting. I think and we'll talk about it a little bit more even right here, but I think I prefer the movie's version based on what you've said. I think, and I'm sure you'll get to it later, but I like the dynamic of all of the events taking place and the different characters and like how it's like clearly Barry's fault basically, but he blames it on everybody else. And then so my next note then is the whole scenario about why they don't, after they hit this guy, why they don't go to the cops. I wanted to know if it happened similarly because I thought it actually in the movie felt very believable. Like initially they're going to, but then Barry's like, "Oh, but I'm drunk," and Ray's like, "Well, I was driving," and he's like, "Well, they won't believe that because it's my car," and then he's like, "Plus there's like alcohol because he spilled it all over inside the car," and they're like, "Plus it's there's alcohol everywhere," and at one point, Freddie does say that they'd all go down for manslaughter, which I don't think that's accurate. But apart from that, I thought that this scene worked really well, and I wanted to know how similar it was to the book.
It's fairly similar. Barry freaks out because actually he was the one driving in the book, and he's also the only one who's 18 at the time. So he like freaks out and says that the rest of them will get off and he'll get charged as an adult.
Yeah.
And similar to the movie, though, Barry is like the driving force that gets them all to not take responsibility for what they did.
Yeah. I liked the fact, I think the movie changing it to where Ray's driving, and so he feels responsible even though it was Barry's fault adds an extra dynamic that makes it I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. The kind of order of events there I think is a little bit more interesting than what happens in the book.
Yeah. So and then they decide, all right, we're going to take this body and dump it in the ocean, and they take it down to the shore, and
it's a string of great decisions.
So many good decisions in a row. But they're going to throw it in. But right at the last second, as they're throwing the body in, he just like wakes up and is like he grabs the crown off of Helen's head, her Croaker Queen crown or whatever. Oof, that's tough to say. And I was like, this is stupid. This is my least favorite part of the movie, I thought, because he just is like alive and fine, or maybe not fine. I don't know. I couldn't tell what his, like, it's the most, this part, and then there's some others, like, it gets a little more campy, like, slasher movie, but the setup up until this point feels really believable. And then this moment, it's like, ugh, like, it's so silly that it kind of took me out of the moment a little bit, because I was like into like the drama and how nightmarish of a situation they were in, and I wanted to know if their victim like comes back, reanimates, and tries to attack them.
So in the book, they don't hit a random fisherman. They actually hit a little boy riding a bike. And they don't try to hide the body. They like hit him and they just like keep driving and then anonymously call 911 from a payphone down the road. And then they find out later that the kid died.
Okay, so it was quite a bit different.
Yeah, it's quite a bit different. There's not any element of like trying to hide the body.
Yeah.
They just basically run away from the scene of the crime.
Okay. Is there a because when they leave the pier after they finally do get the body in and the guy seemingly drowns or is dead, whatever, and they run off, we get a shot that lingers on a necklace that we saw this guy playing with in the opening shot of the film. And it's like, oh, there's going to be this, they didn't wrap up all the loose ends. And I want to know if there was anything like that with the other character about like this, like, this little thing that they didn't know about, didn't think of. And that's what ends up kind of doing them in. I don't even know if in the movie it ultimately is what does them in. It's not really.
No, it's not.
Because the guy's just alive.
Yeah, he's just alive.
But it's in the movie, it's just there so that at the end when we see the guy with it, it sort of signifies who he is and connects those things. But initially, it feels
it's
like
kind of a red herring for us too, because we think that like kind of solidifies this idea in our mind that they killed the guy we saw at the beginning,
right,
with the necklace.
Yeah, and it also it sets up it is a red herring too in the sense that it sets up like we think that's going to be a thing that somehow like is the police or something, who knows, like it's a classic sort of this kind of movie thing where they take care of everything but then there's one little piece of evidence that they didn't see or whatever. And
there's nothing exactly like that. I will say though that the way the antagonist ultimately finds out who was responsible for this hit and run is because Julie, after it happened, anonymously sent flowers to the family, and she sent like a bunch of yellow roses, like tons and tons of these yellow roses. So the guy goes to the flower shop and asks about it, and the girl at the flower shop is like, yeah, I remember that, it was really weird.
That's
and like
interesting.
is able to tell him who did it.
That's
who
actually
sent the flowers.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. That actually that's a pretty interesting little twist compared to the movie. In the movie, we find out ultimately that it's just, I mean, he saw them because he didn't die, so he knew who it was.
He's not even dead.
He's not dead, which is whatever. We'll talk about the end. And obviously spoiled from the your summation, but the classic moment where Julie gets the "I know what you did last summer" letter. I know, but like how similar is that to the book?
Exactly the same. She gets it in the mail. Her mom gives it to her, and it just says, "I know what you did last summer," in like big black blocky capital letters.
Yeah. Sounds like in the movie or in the book, and maybe you'll talk about this more later, but it sounds like in the book it's like the opening almost, as opposed to like in the movie we get it. It's like our first act. Yeah,
the book's story structure is more nonlinear than the movie's is, which I'll talk about.
Okay. Do we have the whole boy thing have changed moment in the movie after we get the big, she gets the letter and then she's got to go reach out to all of her friends. It's been a year that, it's now the summer of the next year. And they're kind of getting the gang back together, and like Barry and Helen broke up. Helen went to New York, but now she's back working in a store because things didn't work out there. Julie's flunking out of college. Ray and Julie broke up. Like all of these things transpired off screen, and we're kind of finding out about them. I thought that was interesting. I mean, it's not. I liked seeing like without sort of just coming. I liked how the movie just jumps without really explaining anything. Like it doesn't really give us any passage of time, or like we don't get like a title card that says like 1 year later or what. At least I don't remember there being a title.
Yeah, no, I don't think
we just jump to college and then see Julie and she looks terrible, and then we go from there. And I liked like sort of just without dwelling on it or like again without showing us it, just like all of a sudden we see how much has changed in a year and how what the fallout from the single event has been, seemingly.
Yeah. So this I think is similar in spirit. Helen and Barry are still together. both of their lives are going fairly well in the book. But so they're like still together, but Barry has kind of lost interest in her and doesn't really want to be dating her anymore. Ray took off to California for a year. And then he has like just now come back to town. Julie is kind of the opposite, but also the same, because in the book, she wasn't like super studious at first.
Yeah.
But then she starts taking school extremely seriously because she wants to go to college as far away as possible.
Yeah.
But the movie does nail that she's like the most affected by it. Like she withdraws, loses weight, abandons previous interests, all a bunch of like classic symptoms of depression.
Right. Yeah. So the ice hook. This is eventually we get to the point. This is the moment where we see Max get murdered in the movie. And he's immediately set up as the villain, potentially, as like he's kind of set up as a red herring as the villain, but then is immediately murdered by some mysterious man with a giant ice hook. And I wanted to know if the sort of, because it's this movie's machete for Jason or Freddy Krueger's glove. It's the slasher movie, the slasher villain's weapon of choice, and I want to know if that comes from the book.
It does not. There is no hook-handed man in the book.
Does the friend zone guy get set up as a red? Well, there is no friend zone
Yeah.
guy. Is there anybody set up as a red herring and then murdered like immediately?
No.
Does anybody die?
No.
I knew that. When I was doing research, I found out that like nobody. That's like the biggest change.
Nobody dies in the book.
And we'll talk about it, I'm sure. But the author was not a fan of them deciding to make this a slasher movie. She
Yeah.
was like, "Nope, that's not what I was doing. Please don't do that." So then the villain goes after. At one point, Barry's like working out in a gym, and then he leaves and. He gets a guy in a car, which looks like his car. It's like the same make and model. It's a BMW or whatever. Like runs him down and drives him through a wall, and then like walks up and stands over him. And then we just cut, and Barry's in the hospital. And I was like, what? Why didn't he kill him? And I wanted to know if that played out, because if it or anything like that happened, I wanted to know. And if not, we can just talk about it and try to figure out why he didn't kill him in that moment.
So Barry does not get run over in the book. He gets shot at one point, but he survives. And we think for a while that he's going to be like paralyzed from the waist down. But by the end of the book, he seems to be like regaining some of the use of his legs.
Yeah.
So probably going to be fine for the most part.
Yeah.
Now in the book, it is revealed that the antagonist meant to kill him. In that moment. Like, that was his intention, shooting him, was to kill him. But then he's like, but actually paralyzing him might be even better, because he was like a big football star and whatever.
Yeah.
Athletic guy. In the movie, maybe just to like maybe unnerve the others.
Yeah, just as more to play with him, or that's the only thing that makes any sense. But he's just standing right over him with the hook, and then it cuts, and it's just like, so he just left him there. Yeah, and I also think it's potentially supposed to be a little bit of a red herring to the audience to make you go, well, why didn't he kill him? Like, there's got to be like, is Barry like in on it, or like, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like maybe that's a little bit of what the movie's going for, because I found it very weird. It's like, why does he not kill him?
But he does like kind of cat and mouse play with them for a while, because he could have killed Helen too.
Right.
He was in her bedroom that night that he cuts her hair.
Yeah.
Could have very easily dispatched with her.
Yeah, speaking of that was my next question, is whether or not Helen wakes. So she's a beauty queen, and we see the hook-handed man go into her room, or into her house,
and then hides in her closet. Which is why you should always check your closet before you go to bed.
It's true,
boys and girls.
But then she wakes up the next morning, and we're obviously worried he's going to murder her. But then she wakes up the next morning, and her hair has been cut, kind of.
Like, it looks a lot worse than it is at first.
Yeah, like on her bed, it's like hair everywhere.
Yeah, there's like hair everywhere, and it looks kind of like choppy. And but then later on, she just like cuts off a few inches of it,
and it looks fine. Yeah, I was like, what? It didn't do anything to her. It was silly. But I want to know if that moment of hacking off, that felt like something, because again, knowing that nobody actually dies in the book, that mostly is just like the person is like just messing with them and like and whatnot and like exacting revenge. I thought this felt like something that could have been in the book.
It is not. But actually, I really liked this part in the movie. Helen is similarly very vain, maybe even more so in the book than she is in the movie. And I thought it made sense to take something from her that she valued above everything else.
Yeah, no, it does make a lot of sense. It doesn't. Again, it's a little.
It falls a little flat because it ends up not.
It looks fine,
It
and
looks
like her hair
fine.
looks fine, and again, even
It's
in
just
that,
a little. It's
even
not
in that-
even short. It's
No.
just a little shorter than it was.
It's so weird. I was like, well, I feel like that. I get what you're going for, but it didn't. I didn't quite work. I don't know. Yeah, because then she's wearing a hat in the next scene, but then literally, like, she goes to the parade the next day, and her hair looks fine.
Yeah,
or whatever.
It's just a few inches shorter.
Okay. So at one point, Julie's driving her car and she hears a noise in the trunk. And she gets out of the car and runs around and opens the trunk. And inside, it's full of crabs. And Max's body is there with crabs coming out of his mouth. And then she runs to go get like Ray and I don't remember who else comes. Everybody else, the other people. And they show up and then the trunk's empty. And that was dumb. It's a great.
There wasn't enough time for him to take all of that.
Because when we see that shot, it's a rotting body and a bunch of crabs in the trunk, and then when she opens the trunk again, it's just like a perfectly dry, clean trunk. And I'm like, wait, what? That makes no sense. I wanted to know if that scene was in the book.
It's not.
Okay.
Nothing like that happens in the book.
It's a creepy moment, but the fact that they then are like, oh, now it's not there, and it's like, wait, was it? Did she hallucinate
Yeah,
it?
like maybe it's supposed to make us question her sanity. I don't know.
That's the only thing that makes any sense. Because but it doesn't go anywhere. Like the fact that she maybe is like hallucinating or something doesn't really. There's nothing else happens with that.
No.
There's
No.
But that's the only thing that makes sense is that it was a hallucination because there's just no way.
Yeah, the trunk's not even wet.
No, yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's silly. It is silly. And then we talked about and right after this, then she's all freaked out because she's like, what is going on? And this is a very classic scene that not another teen movie. I think it was Scary Movie. One of the Scary Movies parodied where she runs out in the street and she's like, what are you waiting for? I'm right here. That thing. And the camera pulls back, big crane shot. I want to know if that moment's from the book.
It's not. No.
Boo. So we talked about the parade. Helen ends up in the parade. She has to go, like, because she was last year's queen or whatever. And Barry's like, it's all right. I'll protect you. I'll come protect you. And then he just sits on the front of the float as they're going down. And he just, like, keeps looking at her. And he's, like, staring around. But he's, like, covered in bruises and like, injuries. And I'm like, I feel like they wouldn't just let this random guy sit. I mean, I guess it's not a random guy, but like, I feel like still they'd be like, no, he can't sit on the float.
You're not in this parade,
no,
sir.
You also look terrifying.
You need to leave.
Yeah. And I wanted to know if anything of that kind of moment happens.
No, there's no parade or anything in the book.
That made me chuckle. I was like, that's dumb. Also, by the way, once I finally figured out what their names were, because for the longest time on my notes, I just called them like Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr. And then finally they said their names enough that I remembered them because they're very easy to remember names because their names are Barry, Helen, Julie, and Ray. And I was like, I bet these are their names in the books because those are the most 70s names. Like, they're not like, those names didn't come from the 2005 script or whatever. Like,
no, 97.
Sorry, 97. Yeah, I still Helen and Barry and Ray are not like mid 90s teen names.
Yeah, those are their names in the book.
Yeah, those are such 70s names. At the parade, Barry sees a guy in a slicker, is what they call it, like the fisherman jacket thing, and he runs down and tackles him. And does this happen in the book? Because if not, I want to talk about the other part of it.
No, this doesn't.
Because then he tackles him, and then he pulls he's got like a big like the like fisherman hat that like covers most of his head, and Barry like tackles him and then rips the hat off and looks at it, and it's an old guy, and he's like, oh, it's not him. And I'm like, you don't know what he looks like.
Could be anyone.
Yeah. I was like, wait. And now the only thing I could think is that at this point they think he's the same age as the guy they hit.
Yeah.
Or they think it's like Barry, that blue guy. They think it's
they think maybe it's somebody around the same age
like who
as
was
that
in the
guy.
grade with him, so they think it must be like in his late 20s or whatever.
But they don't know that.
But they don't know that for sure, and I still found it silly that he's just like, well, it's clearly not him. I'm like, well, maybe you should ask him a couple questions, like, why are you standing at this parade leering at people in a full, like, I know you're in a fishing town, but it's...
We cut back to the parade, and there's, like, a ton of guys wearing the slicker and the hat.
Yeah.
Just at the parade, which
it's dumb.
I don't know, like, maybe since it's like a town pride thing, maybe they would go to the parade in their slickers and hats.
Like, I guess it's possible that they would go to the parade in like the jacket, like if they were working on the docks and they just like moseyed over to the parade to watch or whatever. But I feel like they wouldn't have the hats on and be
it seems a little silly.
It's a little silly.
And then we get this like whole scene where we keep cutting to different guys in this raincoat and hat, and I'm like, we keep dismissing all of these people dressed as the murderer, but we don't know what the murderer looks like.
Like,
so it could be any of them.
Could be any of them. Ultimately, the parade ends, and we're doing the pageant now. This year's pageant, and Sarah Michelle Gellar, Helen, has to sit on stage and kind of like be the previous queen sitting there kind of watching everything.
I could never do that. I could not control my face.
And Barry is up in the balcony watching her, or like watching the show, and he's like, I'll look out for you and I'll sit up in the balcony. And then she looks up and sees a guy come after Barry and grab him and like attack him in the balcony, and she runs up there and gets a cop, and then he's just gone.
Yeah. And
it's a fun scene, but I wanted, and like but she's yelling to like at people to go up there, but like the contestants like singing karaoke so nobody can hear her. And I wanted to know, I liked that scene. I wanted to know if it was in the book.
No, there's nothing like that in the book, but I liked that scene too. I thought it was pretty effective.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how he disappears so quickly, but whatever. He's
a very fast fisherman.
Yeah, this movie's really not concerned with like
physics or
like just making anything
the
that makes
reality
sense.
of how much time it takes
and how things
to move, and
the reality of just how anything works. It's just like, yeah, man, it's a slasher movie. Who cares? We don't care. Then Helen ends up at she's running from, the cop tries to take her home. Cop ends up getting murdered by the guy, and then she ends up breaking out of the cop car and running, and she runs to the store that her and her sister work at, and her sister lets her in. And her sister gets murdered, who's played by the woman from the Adam Sandler movie.
Oh, I didn't
one of the
know
Adam
her
Sandler
from anything.
Anyway, she's in one of the Adam Sandler movies. I think it's Billy Madison. I think the one where he goes back to school. She's the teacher, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, it's her, and she gets murdered, and then Helen is like, like getting chased around this department store, and she. They have mannequins everywhere because it's like a department store, and they cover the mannequins at night, I guess, or maybe they were going to paint or something.
I don't know.
Or like whatever. But the mannequins are all covered in like plastic tarps, and it's obvious what's going to happen. But the guy's like pretending to be a mannequin and jumps on her.
Yeah.
And does that happen in the book?
No, it doesn't. I had kind of mixed feelings on this one because like they basically had to do it.
Yeah.
Once they put the mannequins in there,
and then ended up
But I was 100% expecting it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also thought it was funny that the killer then immediately got tangled up in the plastic sheet and like couldn't chase her.
Yeah.
He played himself.
He did. He really did. So ultimately, the story we find out is that Willis. So I'm trying to remember their names, and I explained it in the beginning, but the guy they thought they hit and killed is a guy named like David Egan.
Yeah.
Who is like a 28-year-old. That's who they thought they hit and killed, and they found out through research that he had been in a car accident a year before, and that his girlfriend had died in that car accident, and they thought that he was there that night, maybe to kill himself or whatever, just hang, and we saw him, and he's the guy we see in the opening shot, and they think they hit and killed because his body ends up getting found, so they think it's him that they hit and killed, but then it turns out that it's actually this guy named Willis who killed Egan, and that's why Egan's body was found, is because this guy named Willis killed him.
Right.
And then
that's why Willis was out there.
And that's why Willis was out there that night, and they hit Willis, and then Willis killed Egan because his daughter died, like because
I think the story was that like Egan was indirectly responsible for his daughter's death.
Yeah, because he was driving
he
or
survived
whatever.
the car accident and she didn't.
She didn't. Yeah. And then Willis starts coming after them because they run him over. And again, the motivation being revenge / he's got a vendetta against hit and run drivers or people who are in car accidents.
He just seems like a vengeful kind of guy.
Yeah.
In general,
yeah.
Like if you do him any type of wrong, he's gonna seek vengeance on you.
And random people like Johnny Galecki had nothing to do with any of this.
Wait, the cop?
Yeah.
What did the cop do?
Nothing at all. And so I want to know if any of that is the ultimate, like who the murderer is in the book. Is any of that similar?
No.
Well, no, it's a little boy, you said.
Yeah, no, it's a little boy. The murderer or attempted murderer in the book, I guess, it ends up being the little boy's half brother, like his older half brother.
That makes sense. I mean, as soon as you said it was a little kid, I was like, it's probably like his dad or his brother or something, like somebody related to the little kid. Which I mean, it's similar. It's a relation to the one of the victims, but not the victim of the person they killed.
It's a little convoluted. And I see what the movie was trying to do by like setting up.
Yeah.
We think it was one person, but it was actually another person. But it is like a little bit convoluted.
And that's my next question is, I wanted to know if the book is solvable, because this movie, when we were getting towards the end, I was like, and then once the reveal happens, I was like, and I think it's the biggest weakness of the movie. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, you never could have figured that out. Mm-mm. There was never enough information supplied that you could have possibly figured out who the murderer was. Like, the movie's plot, it ends up being like complete unsolvable nonsense. It's fun nonsense, and that's like, full of weird, silly twists and turns, but there's no way you could have been like, that's who the killer is. Because the whole time you're trying to figure it out. Like, I wonder who the killer is. Like, you think you're going to be able to figure it out, and it's just not. There's no way. There's literally no way. I don't know how you could possibly. You would have to just guess and get lucky. You have to create a crazy story.
Yeah, you would have to get incredibly lucky because we're not aware. We're not even aware of this character until the very end.
And that's why I was hoping it was going to at least be somebody we had seen before.
Yeah.
Like, I wish they had done, and I think if the way to do this movie, to tweak it slightly to make it work a little bit better, is introduce the Willis guy at least at some point as like a fisherman on the boat with Ray or something. Like something, and he mentions that his daughter, like, even just a throwaway line about like Ray's like, oh yeah, his daughter died last year or something. That's just something so that we have any possible hint that, like, because he just comes out of nowhere. And that was the thing I was most disappointed at in the film. Because apart from that, it's fun. But so is the book solvable, or is the book equally like just, oh, okay, I never could have got that?
The book is totally solvable. So the villain in the book has a double identity, which I mentioned. One that is dating Julie and another that is flirting with Helen. Mm-hmm. And I read that as a fun fact for the prequel.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was the fun fact about like she overheard her daughter talking with her friend about a boy, and they both like came to realize that they were talking about the same boy.
Oh, yeah, you did.
And I was like, I don't know how that factors in yet.
Yes, that's right, you're right, yeah.
But as soon as I read that fun fact, I knew which two characters it would end up being. But I think even if I hadn't read that, I would have figured it out eventually that like they were the same guy, just maybe not as quickly.
Right.
Duncan uses similar but not identical language to describe both men, so you can totally catch on if you're paying attention.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, and that's my biggest complaint, because it's really disappointing in a movie. And now this is a slasher movie, not like a whodunit, but it is also a whodunit. Like, or like the whole point is they're trying to figure out who's coming after them, and you're trying to figure out with them because that's like the same thing in Scream, which I've actually never seen Scream, but from what I understand, that's like the same premise. There's a guy in a mask, a person in a mask killing people. They're like, who is this? It's one of our friends, or it's somebody we know. We don't, and like. The fact that you just can't have gotten it, like you can't have cracked the mystery, is dumb. Like that's disappointing.
That's fair.
So then we get to the big climax of the film, which takes place on a fishing boat, and I thought that was a fun location, like a unique, fun location.
Yeah, it's
for a
interesting.
final, sort of climactic confrontation between our protagonist and our antagonist, and the movie actually uses it to pretty effective, like.
And I think it's interesting too because I have to assume that the majority of people watching this movie have probably never been on a fishing boat like
No.
that. So it's kind of interesting, like you're not expecting it, you don't know like where all they can go and what
Yeah.
they're going to be able to do. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I thought, and the movie does a good job of utilizing all the different parts of it and different, like she goes into the ice storage area, like where they store the fish and everything, and it's funny because that's the other thing is this movie came out before like Deadliest Catch was a big thing, so I think then people would have been a little bit more familiar with like because like that's you see the big ice like cargo hold on those boats and stuff. Well, they use water, it's not ice, I think, because they just throw the crabs in water. But either way, I thought that was interesting. I wanted to know if that came from the book.
No, it doesn't. There are no boats in this
Okay.
book.
Oh, does it not take place in like a fishing town?
No,
Oh, okay.
just a normal little town.
Yeah.
It's kind of a two-part climax in the book, sort of. There's a big scene in Helen's apartment where he tries to kill her and she ends up like getting away from him. And then the final climax is outside of Julie's house,
Okay.
which is not super interesting.
Yeah. Is anything about the climax at all similar?
Ray does show up just in the nick of time to
Okay.
save Julie.
Okay.
And he does thunk him on the head with a heavy object. It
There you
works
go.
better in the book than it does. He doesn't get right back up.
That was dumb
like he does in the movie.
So in the movie, he swings a gigantic metal like pulley
Yeah.
system into the guy's face, and then the guy just gets back up like 30 seconds. I was like, no, his nose is broken. He's probably dead. If not, he's got a massive concussion. But it's a slasher movie. Our guy's like borderline supernatural villain. So, and he's also definitely still alive, probably. So. Which is my final question. Do we get sequel bait in the book where in the movie Julie, she is now returned to college, it would seem, and she's kind of like showering and she walks out and she finds a letter that says, or no, not a letter. She sees a letter, but it ends up being nothing.
Yeah.
But she walks back into the shower and written like in the steam and the glass, it says, or maybe it's blood. I can't.
No, it's in the steam.
Yeah. It says, I still know. And then something comes crashing through the glass, and
Yeah.
that's where it cuts, and we don't know what it is or whatever. I want to know if we get any of the sequel bait.
No sequel bait. The villain gets arrested at the end.
Okay.
It's very self-contained.
Doesn't get
little
mysteriously
story.
or drug into the depths of the ocean, never to be seen again, maybe dead, maybe not.
No.
Okay. All right. That was all of my questions. Like I said, I didn't have Lost in adaptation. I probably could have, but I was worried that it wasn't going to be similar enough. I kind of had some mini Lost in adaptations throughout was that in the book. But we're going to get to Katie's section and talk about what she thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
I preferred the book's method of storytelling, non-linear storytelling. The book starts with the summer after and then throughout drops details about what happened the summer before, last summer.
Yeah.
And for me, that built mystery and anticipation better than telling the story in a linear fashion.
Yeah, I think that is interesting.
Like, it doesn't not work in the
No,
movie.
I think the movie does work. It just does. Those are just two different.
Yeah,
It kind of does
two
two
different
things.
methods.
Yeah.
And to me, like I enjoyed the non-linear style of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I get that. I think the thing that I don't know. I'd be interested to see if somebody like re-edit, because you could very easily re-edit the movie to follow.
Oh yeah, you could. You definitely
could just
could.
and maybe somebody has, but you could just re-edit the movie like without shooting anything different, probably to follow sort of a non-linear version where we open up with like the letter. And I would be interested to see how that affected like how we felt about the characters, because I wonder if it. I don't know. I would be interested to see the movie done in that version, or
Yeah,
like
that
in
would be
that
interesting.
in that style. Yeah.
This is a little thing, but we do meet Helen's parents in the book. We see her dad briefly, and he doesn't seem like that great of a guy in the movie. He's kind of just like checked out in front of the TV with a beer. But we meet both of her parents in the book, and there's a very sweet moment between them that I actually liked a lot. So it was something I liked in the book. This is something that's very different between the book and the movie.
Yeah.
But I liked the book's method of the villain having a double identity and using that to get close to some of the characters.
Yeah.
I thought that was very insidious and creepy.
Yeah.
It's like this idea that you don't really know the people you meet.
Yeah, no, I think that is really interesting. And I'm sure, I feel like in my back of my mind, I have a memory of a movie, like a horror movie thriller that did that exact thing. And then like two characters realized that they're both like talking about the same person, and I feel like I've seen that, and I just can't place where or what from. But it is a creepy idea, and I do like that.
And I think it's interesting too because, like, if Julie and Helen, like, they weren't like super great friends to begin with in the book. It's not really like it is in the movie.
Yeah.
But if they had been better friends and like maintained that more, the whole thing would have been for naught.
Yeah.
For the villain.
Yeah.
Because they would have talked to each other about it and realized. My last note here is that in the movie, they never have to take responsibility for their actions, which is kind of the whole point of the story in the book. Like, the movie literally has them continue to lie and say that they don't know why the killer would be targeting. They're like, I have no idea why he would be targeting us.
Yeah. I mean,
and I guess you could make the argument that it ultimately doesn't matter in the movie.
Yeah.
Because they didn't actually kill him, and now he's seemingly dead for real.
That is true. It is a different. There's less to take. I mean, they still should. They still did a wrong. Yeah, they still did a bad.
Yeah.
I guess the only other thing you could say is that the movie was probably planning for a sequel.
Yes, absolutely.
And so having them not complete that sort of arc leaves it going for the second one.
Yeah. So. No, I agree.
All right, let's go ahead now and find out what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
So I mentioned this a second ago, but I liked that Julie and Helen seemed to be closer friends than they are in the book. In general, it seemed like they're all kind of better friends in the movie, whereas in the book, Ray and Barry are friends, and that's kind of why they all hang out together.
Yeah.
And I love female friendship representation.
Yeah.
So also mentioned this, but I thought it was interesting in the movie that this is like a way more serious crime. That they're committing. Like, not just the hit and run, but they're actively covering up a crime.
Yes. No, yeah. I mean, they're
movie.
throng a body in the ocean.
Yeah.
And then ultimately Barry, like, punches the guy and, like, steals the crowd. Yeah, there's much more going on than just like, oh, we hit something, keep driving.
Yeah.
Which is still bad, but yeah.
I thought it made way more sense in the movie that Helen didn't get what she wanted and ultimately failed at, like, her life plan to go be an actress. In the book, she's just getting everything she wants when we meet her. She's kind of insufferable.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. Again, I like that when we come back to all of them a year later, like, everything is going poorly for everybody pretty much.
Yeah. I think that's more interesting than what the book does. I also liked the movie's changes to Barry. He's still an obnoxious douche who was like the popular cool jock guy in high school, but the movie's version obviously cares about his friends.
Yeah.
And he puts it all on the table trying to help Helen before he dies, even though they aren't like together anymore.
Yeah.
I also liked that Helen in the movie is not still desperately clinging to Barry. In the book, like I said, they're like still together, but he's getting bored with her. He's like, she's clingy and like wants to get married, and I want to sow my wild oats and whatever. But he treats her like garbage, and she's still like making hard eyes at him all the time.
Yeah.
And it was just very hard to read at times. I enjoyed that the movie gave us more red herrings than the book did. There's red herrings with Max, with Elsa, with Missy. Elsa is like a little bit of a red herring in the book. It's suggested that maybe she could be the one sending
Yeah.
the letters because she is really jealous of Helen, but I feel like it's much more so in the movie.
Yeah.
Like there's a moment where I was like, oh, Elsa could actually
Yeah.
be the killer.
Yeah. Elsa's her sister.
Yeah,
right?
Helen's sister.
And then Missy's the sister of
David Egan,
right?
who died, yeah.
Anne Heche in the film.
Speaking of Elsa, I was glad that the movie killed her because she was a straight bitch in the book. I hated her. She was horrible.
Yes.
And I didn't even like Helen in the book, but Elsa made me feel bad for Helen. I was like, it sucks that your sister's such a bitch. I'm sorry. And my last note here was an iconic exchange at the end of this movie between Ray and Julie. And Ray is like, I love you. And Julie says, I understand your pain. Which might be the best response to I love you that I've ever heard.
It's pretty good. It's pretty rough. That's a tough one. Freddie Prinze Jr. got yeah, that was oof. All right. This is we have a different title for our next segment. Katie, what's this next segment?
This next segment is the movie utilized these elements.
Okay.
Because it didn't really nail anything.
Right.
I mean, it used the same names of the four main characters, so I guess it nailed that. But there were some like random elements that it pulled from the book and used.
Okay.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
We talked about earlier how the four main characters are all kind of like archetypes or typical teen character tropes. And I thought that the movie did a good job of updating those to like a new decade.
Yeah.
Because it is the same in the book. They're like the four kind of the same tropes.
Yeah.
So I thought we did a good job with updating that. They do have an argument about coming clean about the whole thing while Barry lies in a hospital bed after being grievously injured.
Okay.
It's just Ray and Barry in the book, but similar idea. Two characters do go and scope out the victim's family, but it's Julie and Ray in the book. They do meet the sister, and she is kind of an oversharer. More so in the book.
Yeah.
She just kind of like spills her guts unprompted in the book, which I thought was interesting. There's no ominous vibes with her in the book like there are like they are in the movie, so she's not that much of a red herring.
Yeah.
Helen does bust open a window and crawl out in an effort to escape the killer, which she does in the cop car. And she also, it's the same event in the book, she busts out a second story window and like throws herself out of it. But she does both of those things at separate times in the movie. She does bust out a window and she does throw herself out of another window. So
Indeed she does. All right. We've got a few odds and ends to get to before we get to the final verdict.
So right off the bat, huge plus for me with this movie was that it was only an hour 40.
Yeah.
Movies need to be shorter. That's my lukewarm take. It's not a hot take. A lot of people agree with me. Movies should be shorter. I'm tired of going to having to sit through 3-hour movies. My bladder can't handle it. I'm 32. It's not fun.
So my first thing is the movie starts playing and the production company like graphic logo starts playing, and I was like, oh, that's what Shelby's tweet meant, because I saw Shelby like tweeting about the movie and she said there's a tiger in this movie, and I was like, wait, what? And it's just the opening production company's like logo.
But it looks like
it
the
does
start
kind
of
of
the
seem
movie.
like the start of the movie at first. You're like, wait a second, what is going on? Yeah, but it made me laugh.
And then moving forward from that, I loved the opening titles because I could already feel the 1990s just washing over me.
Yeah.
The look, the music, the font, all of it.
Yeah. And then we get the opening shot that Ebert was talking about, where he said the best shot of the movie is the opening shot. And at first I was like, oh, it's just like a helicopter shot across the ocean. But then it is a pretty cool shot because it keeps going in, and it circles around, and we see the curve, like the turn where they end up hitting the guy, kind of, and the music becomes ominous in that moment when we see the curve. And then it even pushes in further, and I don't know if this was all like an actual shot or if there's any sort of weird like compositing or CG here, because then it loops around, and then we push into a guy sitting on the cliff, and it was impressive, and I wasn't sure if it was just as straightforward as they really just flew all the way around and then pushed. I guess they probably did. I don't know, but it is an impressive shot. I'll have more notes on Ebert saying it's the only good shot in the film. Well, he says it's the best. It is the best, but he by implications sort of implies that the rest of it is terrible, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. But
so in this movie, Freddie Prinze Jr. and Jennifer Love Hewitt have sex for the first time on the beach.
What a nightmare.
I was like, nice.
That's a nightmare.
No, I agree. It's a total nightmare. Sand in places there should never be sand.
Yeah, and especially such everything.
And it was probably cold.
Yeah, and like windy and no, not ideal. Not ideal. I love during that scene he says to her, "You're gonna go off to college in the fall and fall in love with some head shaving," or no, she says to him, to Freddie Prinze Jr., and fall in love with some head shaving tattoo covered philosophy student. And I was like, we
were both like, I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was maybe like the dumbest thing that happened in the movie to me. When they're trying to move the body off of the road.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Johnny Galecki's character just shows up.
He drives up in his truck.
Like it just happens to be him, I guess. And they send Julie over to distract him.
Mm-hmm.
But
the way it's edited,
he was right there with the truck headlight. He's right there. He 1000% saw them moving that body.
We see them carrying the body across the street,
like
and then
through his headlight beams.
Reverse shot. He's like 50 feet away in his truck. I'm like,
he's seen. Yeah. And then later on, after she gets the letter, Julie's like, what if somebody saw us? And I was like, yeah, probably the guy who saw you.
Max saw you. He was literally just sitting there staring at you guys drag a body across the road. Like, yeah, it's so dumb.
Like, and I don't know. I guess this is just supposed to be part of his whole, like, red herring thing. Like, oh, he definitely saw them. But the way it's, like, shot and edited is so dumb.
Yeah. I was delighted by the quaint little department store, like the small town department store. Like with first, I'm like, oh, is it like is she work at like a men's dress store? Because it's like like a dress clothes store. Because at first it looks like it's mostly like men's dress clothes, but then she's like, oh, Helen's over at the women's cosmetic counter. Yeah. And I was like, oh, is this a department store? It's so tiny. Like it's so tiny. It's so adorable.
The departments are all just their own counters.
Yeah. It's like, holy cow. They have like a shirt. And then it's like, they have a perfume. Yeah.
I loved the scene where they were at the docks, like right after. I guess this is when they go to find Ray. They're all at the docks, and it's like a tasting menu of 90s sunglasses styles.
Yes, it really is.
They're all wearing a different style of sunglasses that were popular in the 90s.
Yep. And eventually, I think this is right after Max gets murdered, I was like, at this point, I'm like, okay. Or at some point right around here, I was like, okay, the only options for who the killer is that it's Ray, or that it is an entirely random unknown person. It was just an entirely random. That's it. Like it's some nobody that will never, or it's Ray. Like those are the only two options. Like after Max was killed. Yeah.
I don't remember when this happened or who did this, but the next thing I have written in my notes is "You're gonna die, punch," which I found really funny. I remember finding that really funny.
I don't know what that is.
But I don't remember. I think it might have been Barry when he was mad at Ray. Maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right.
You're gonna die.
Yeah, he
punch.
he punches Ray in the face. Yeah. Because he thinks it's Ray. or something like that. He's like convinced it's Ray or something.
Something
yeah.
about that moment just really tickled me.
Yeah. In the scene where Julie and Helen go to visit Anne Heche, with Missy, is it Missy? Is that her name? When they go to visit her, Jennifer Love Hewitt is wearing like this maxi skirt thing, like this floor length skirt and like a sweater. And she is pulling it off in ways that Kristen Stewart in Twilight wishes she could. It is a very good look on her. And it's such a weird, like, I don't know. It's just like, it's such ugly clothing, but it somehow worked. I guess when you're Jennifer Love Hewitt, like all clothes just work. Like it's whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So when we get onto the boat at the end, the boat of the killer, Julie sees that he has like this lair with a bunch of like pictures of them and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, he got some of those pictures developed fast. Because some of them are from that morning.
Yeah.
They're like
literally.
of the parade.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe the bottom of his boat, he has a dark room, apparently. He goes down into the ice chest room and develops pictures. I really thought when in that scene where the killer gets into Sarah Michelle Gellar's house and we see him like go in the closet, we see at one point she's going to walk up the stairs and we see him like get up the stairs and go around the corner right before she gets there. And I really thought we were going to get the Hitchcock stair shot, which if you've watched, I think it's in Psycho. And it might be in other ones, but there's like a very famous shot of like somebody falling down the stairs. I think, it's Psycho. I'm probably pretty sure. And I really thought we were going to get that, but we don't get that. And then also in her bedroom, I was like, I want a bedroom that just has 3 gigantic floor to ceiling windows like surrounding my bed. Her bed is like in this, the room, it's like a rounded, like sort of like room in the corner of the house, I guess. And yeah, there's these giant windows all the way around her bed.
She has a really nice room.
She really does. She has like the nicest room. I was impressed by that.
Question we both had at the end of this movie, when Julie is on the boat, she gets tricked into going onto the killer's boat. Because she thinks it's Ray for a minute, and then the killer he clotheslines Ray and is like, oh, come with me, I'll make sure you're safe, blah, blah, blah. And then starts taking them out to sea. And so she's on this boat and she's panicking because she figures out that he's the killer. And I'm like, girl, can you swim?
Yeah.
Because you live in a fishing town, so I would think you could. I would take my chances. I'd be like, stay on this boat with a murderer or see if I can swim 20 feet back to shore.
Not storming.
I'll take my chances
it's not storming.
with the water.
The water's not particularly choppy. It's not storming, and it's not like it's summer. It's not like it's free. It's not like it's like she's gonna jump in and like freeze to death in 10 minutes. It's like I don't know. Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, just
take off your sweater, take off your shoes,
just
jump in the ocean,
go swim. Yeah. So this movie isn't incredibly shot, but as I mentioned earlier, Ebert was like, "Oh, the best shot's the first one in the movie," and the first shot is impressive. But there are some perfectly fine horror shots in this movie. There was one in particular. It's the scene where she finds Johnny Galecki's body in her trunk, where the camera does this big sweeping dolly around her car as she walks to the back, which was really good. And there's a handful of really good horror shots. And I was like, all right, Ebert, calm down. I mean, yeah. My disagreement with Ebert on many things is well documented on the show, but it's just another moment where I was like, oh, come on. Also, Sarah Michelle Gellar is just serving looks throughout this movie. This is the one where after her hair gets chopped off, she comes out and she's wearing, I don't even know what she's wearing. It's like these high-waisted yoga pant looking things, a blue sports bra.
Yeah, like a crop top kind of.
It looks like
bra,
a bra, basically, like a sports bra, and then this big black,
like a newsboy-esque cap.
Oh my god, it's such a look. It's fantastic.
It's very 1997.
Yeah. And then Ray on the boat. At one point, Ray is fighting the hook guy, and Ray grabs a fishing one of those spears they use to pull fish out of the water. It's a 6 foot long pole arm basically, and he's fighting a guy with a 6-inch long ice hook, and he loses that fight. I'm like, buddy, you can't lose that fight. You have all the reach in the world, and a poking instrument, and you lose to a guy who literally just has a hook, you just poke him until he dies. Like, it's easy. There's a reason that in like wars back in the day, every foot soldier had a spear. It's because they're easy to use and they're better than every other weapon because you have way more range. And I was like, how do you lose that fight? How? So stupid.
My last note is just, wow, that ending.
Yeah, it's a heck of an ending. He gets his hand chopped off in the block and tackle and
Oh no, I was talking about the sequel bait tease
with the
where,
it is something else.
Somebody comes crashing through the shower.
Through the glass. I assume that in the second movie we open with that and it ends up being like a red herring or something because her and Freddie Prinze Jr. are in the sequel.
Yeah.
And from what I read on IMDb, like the premise is like they're at like they go on like vacation together to a resort and then shit goes crazy at the resort. So it's not her. Like, this is not like the
like she
murderer.
doesn't die right there.
or even like it can't be the murderer or anything because it's like I said, they go to a resort, or I guess it could in something, I don't know, but yeah, from everything I my guess is it ends up being like, if I assume that the second movie probably starts right there and then it ends up being something weird like like a red herring.
I've never seen the second movie. I don't think I probably will. I'm not particularly
interested either. It's got worse reviews than this one. I did enjoy this movie, but
it was fun.
Katie, before we wrap up, we wanted to mention you can do us a giant favor by heading over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there for $2, $5, or $15 a month. You can also support us on Facebook, or go to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Goodreads. Follow us on all the social media and keep track of us there. If you are a patron at the $15 level, you get to make an Academy Award request, which means you get to request a film or book for us to do, and it will move towards the front of the queue. And this one, in fact, was a patron request. Who by?
This was a patron request from Gray Hightower.
Thank you, Gray. We had a lot of fun watching and talking about this movie, but now it's time, Katie, for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
This is a tricky one because the only thing that the book and movie truly share is a premise.
Yeah.
4 friends who commit a crime together and are later targeted by someone who really wants them to pay for it. Anyone choosing between these two is, I think, going to be heavily influenced by what they're looking for in that type of story. The book is a fairly serious thriller that's pretty bloodless, but examines issues of guilt and personal responsibility. It's fairly standard YA fare in that its goal is ultimately to convey a message about morality. The movie is fairly standard slasher horror blockbuster fare of the time period. Its goal is to have fun and not much else. While the urban legend-esque premise of the film is a little soapy and silly, I understand why the film went that route rather than the more serious plot lines that the book employs. Both the stories/mediums accomplish what they set out to do, which, again, were 2 very different things. It's almost impossible to even semi-objectively deem one better because,
they don't
like I said, it's going to depend on what you are looking for in this kind of story. I enjoyed the movie's subtle changes to its 4 main characters, as well as the increased number of red herrings and twists and turns. But what it really boils down to, for me, is that I just plain old had more fun watching the movie than I did reading the book. And again, I think that is intentional on both sides. But for me, that is the main reason that I'm going to give this one to the movie.
There you go. Katie's choosing the movie this week. But Katie, what about next time? What are we talking about in 2 weeks' time?
Well, coming up next, we are going to do something that we have not done in a while.
Yeah.
Which is a listener's choice. And our listener's choice is going to be back to school themed. So we have some options that are commonly found on the curriculum in, at least here in America. So our listener's choice will be between The Great Gatsby, To Kill a Mockingbird, and The Outsiders.
Wow. Yep, 3 classics. I've read 2 of those. I did not read The Outsiders.
I have read all 3 of those.
Yeah, I read Great Gatsby and To Kill a Mockingbird, but did not read The Outsiders for whatever reason. Missed that one in high school. Cool, that could be fun. Yeah, that's a fun idea, and I think that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see.
There are several Great Gatsby movies, though, isn't there?
There's at least 2 that I
yeah.
know of. I am more interested in looking at the 2013.
Oh, okay. I've not seen that one. I
haven't either.
I think I watched the older one in high school, like when we read it or whatever. And I've seen To Kill a Mockingbird. We for sure watched that like with the book, you know, back in when I read that in like middle school or whatever. Outsiders I've never read or seen. So that's exciting. I am looking for. I don't want to spoil the poll. But I do have one that I hope wins. I'm just not going to say what
I
it
also have one that I hope wins, but I'm not going to say what it is.
We won't influence the poll.
I will be putting up these polls like either the day after or the day after this episode goes up.
Cool.
So be on the lookout for that and let us know which of those 3 required reading classics you would like us to cover.
So that's another great reason to follow us on all of the social media so that you can vote in that poll and pick what we talk about next time. And until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
Keep reading books.
keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.